Yeah, hi everyone. We're back again with another insightful session for all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those who've joined us from across the world. I am Manish Krishnan, Head of Marketing here at QKS Group, and we welcome you all to today's session on where financial crime programs fall short at execution, risk compliance priorities for 2026. Once again, thank you all for joining us. Over the past decade, financial institutions have made significant investment in transaction monitoring, fraud platforms, and compliance frameworks. Yet, many organizations still struggle to translate these investments into consistent, measurable risk outcomes. In 2026, the challenge is no longer about detection capability. It is about execution discipline, fragmented ownership, alert fatigue, siloed investigations, and increasingly regulatory scrutiny continue to expose gaps in how financial crime programs operate day to day. In today's research led session, we'll explore where these execution gaps exist and what risk and compliance leaders must rethink to build more resilient, integrated, and outcome driven financial crime programs. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today, Divya Baranwal, Vice President and Principal Analyst here at QKS Group. We have Anand Ramaswamy, Practice Director, and Vishal Jagasia, Associate Director, both at the Financial Crime and Compliance domain here at QKS. They will share a practical insight on how institutions can move beyond technology adoption towards stronger execution and governance in 2026. We encourage all of you to raise any questions that you may have across the session in the Q&A section below. With that, let's get started and over to you, Divya.
Thanks a lot, Anish, and I welcome everyone for this session. Let me start by setting the context for today's discussion. And what we are addressing today in the webinar is not going to be just on financial crime risk, but we are going to focus on the execution gap that today exists between the investments that is being made by you and the outcomes that you are receiving. So we have kind of structured this session into five focused sections. First, we will establish the current landscape and why, despite billions of dollars that is being spent on various tools and technologies, the outcome still isn't what we expect it to be. The second is where we'll dive into the technology blind spots. We'll talk about specifically what are the blind spots in detection, decisioning, and intelligence layers. Third, we will shift to what we believe is the core issue, and that is where we are going to be talking about execution gaps, and we are going to cover all the areas right from process to governance to compliance design. Next, we will outline the future trends and we'll include some insights for you so that you are ready for the challenges of 2026. And finally, we'll be closing with a practical roadmap on what you leaders should prioritize next. So the intent today is very clear that the session is not going to be a technology discussion. This is going to be more on the system design and the execution discussion. So let's move forward. So this is where I would like to just take some time and lay out what we see as the reality of today's financial crime landscape. Now, if we look at what is happening, we see that financial institutions across the globe today are investing heavily across data, across investing in all the kind of technologies and tools, and also on regulatory frameworks. But despite so much investment being made, we still see that there is a very big execution gap. And some of the data that we want to, make you acquainted to is what we are dealing today. Just so that you get the scale of the discussion before we actually dive into the specifics. Is what we're talking here is roughly about $3.1 trillion of illicit financial flow that is happening globally. So that's really a big volume of money that we're talking about. Secondly, we see that the compliance costs are rising. So it is estimated at about $200 billion annually, which clearly states that the amount of investment banks and financial institutions are making towards compliance. Yet, despite all of this, we see the false positives still remain a big problem for institutions. And despite deploying all the best of breed technologies, what institutions are saying is that only 1% of illicit funds are actually intercepted. Now that is a huge, big chunk of money which is just getting lost, and banks are not able to track it, recover it, right? So definitely the problem is very big here. Now, what these figures tell us is that, firstly, that the problem is not about lack of investment, definitely. So, investment definitely is there. The problem is also not about lack of tools. We do have proper tools. The problem here is essentially about the execution is not effective, right? And that is what actually we are also seeing in our research, because at QKS Group, we talk to multiple end users across the globe. These are banks, fintechs, these are financial institutions, credit unions across the globe. And what we see is that everybody is resonating on some of the challenges. And the challenges are the data environments are fragmented, so there is no unification of data. The teams are still working in silos, and what people say is that the processes, they're not designed for real time risk. So because of all these challenges, what is coming across very clearly is that although there is a lot of activity which is happening on detection front, but risk reduction is not that effective, right? So there is definitely a disparity between what is expected versus what is actually seen or visible. So moving ahead, let's go to the next slide. And this is an interesting slide because this slide captures what we call more like an investment outcome disconnect model. So what is happening here is that on one side you see that institutions are heavily investing, be it in terms of data, in terms of technology, in terms of compliance frameworks. But on the other side, what we see is three structural issues essentially. The first one is the fragmented ownership, because the teams are separate and everybody is operating independently. So be it fraud team, be it sanctions team, be it AML team, everybody is operating independently. So that's definitely one issue. Another issue is that the systems which they are working on is very reactive. So it is what also we call alert driven operating model, and these are not essentially intelligence led models. So that is one of the problem. Another problem, which is there is no real time orchestration, right? Because decisions are not made at the moment of risk; they are mostly made after the problem or the risk has already occurred. So, if we have to summarize what we are talking about today, because I'm going to set this stage and then kind of hand it over to my teammates to take it further, is what essentially we are trying to say here is that uh, these financial institutions that we see are all, I can say, is vertically optimized, but they're not horizontally optimized. What it means is that vertically they are working very well. So every function is performing very well individually, but there is a lot of fragmentation horizontally. So if we have to look collectively, the systems are failing. The systems are failing to identify risk, to reduce risk, to mitigate risk. So what institutions are actually seeing, despite investing so much of money on best of breed systems, is they are definitely able to identify activities. So there is definitely detection is there, Alert volumes are there, but the problem is that actual prevention or interception is not happening. So, this is why what we want to emphasize in today's discussion throughout the webinar is the problem that the industry is facing is not of a detection problem. So, detection is not a problem today. The problem is how do you make the right decision? So, there is no presence of good decisioning and an orchestration platform. So, that is essentially the issue that we will be talking out. And with this, for the next slides, I will pass it on to Vishal to throw some more light.
Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Divya. Yeah, so we look at the technology blind spots. What are the operational and data challenges in 2026? So before we start, let's see, while institutions have invested heavily in financial crime technology, the real challenge today is not capability, but execution, that is across detection, decisioning, intelligence, and orchestration layers. Critical blind spots are limiting their effectiveness. Let's break down where these gaps exist and why current frameworks are falling short in a real-time risk environment. Let's start with the detection layer first and see how risks are getting identified at the signal level. So we take the first one, which is siloed detection architecture. So fraud, AML, and sanction systems continue to operate in isolation with limited data sharing, creating gaps in identifying cross-channel risks. In this year, in 2026, increasingly sophisticated fraud and neural networks have exploited these silos, leading to missed signals across the customer lifecycle. Financial institutions, we see, must move towards unified platforms with shared data and decisioning layers. The next we see is inadequate scam and social engineering detection. What we see is that the traditional systems, they focus on transaction anomalies, but fail to detect human manipulation patterns, such as social engineering and authorized push payment scams. This allows a seemingly legitimate transactions to bypass the controls. Now, what can be done is integrating behavioral biometrics and session intelligence can help address this gap. Next that we see is the decision layer, where we see how the signals are getting prioritized, scored, and acted upon in real time. We take each one of them one by one. The first one is the limited real-time processing capabilities. What we are seeing is many legacy systems, they remain batch-driven and cannot support real-time decisioning required for instant payment ecosystems like Unified Payments Interface, that is very famously known as UPI, and real-time payments. This delay results in irreversible fraud losses and weak prevention outcomes. Institutions, we feel they need to adopt low latency, event-driven architectures to enable real-time risk assessment. The next that we see is the alert-centric systems, but the ones which are not intelligence-led. Now, over-reliance on rule-based alert generation leads to high false positives and investigator fatigue. This reduces operational efficiency and it also increases the risk of missing critical alerts. A shift towards AI-driven risk scoring and prioritization is essential for better outcomes. The next we see is the static risk models versus the dynamic threat landscape, which is it also impacts the detection. Static rules we see and thresholds, they cannot keep pace with rapidly evolving fraud techniques, leading to declining detection effectiveness over time. Now, fraudsters, they continuously adapt while systems lag behind. Institutions, we feel, should adopt adaptive machine learning models with continuous learning capabilities. The next that we see is the weak model governance and explainability. Now, many institutions, they lack robust model validation, monitoring, and explainability frameworks, which are increasingly required by regulators. Poor governance over here, it reduces the trust in automated decisions and also exposes institutions to compliance risks. Now, strengthening the model lifecycle management and adopting explainable AI is the key. The next that we see is the static risk models versus the dynamic threat landscape. Now, static rules and thresholds we see cannot keep pace with rapidly evolving fraud techniques, leading to the declining detection effectiveness over time. Now, fraudsters, they continuously adapt while systems lag behind. Institutions we see should adopt adaptive machine learning models and continuous learning capabilities. With respect to this last point, we see that the challenge is not that institutions are unable to detect signals. It's that their decisioning models are not evolving at the same pace as fraud. Static risk models, they fail to adapt to new scam typologies, which is leading to a poor prioritization and delayed response. Next slide, please. Yeah. So next that we look into is the intelligence layer. This is where we see that how data is getting unified, enriched, and contextualized to generate insights. Let's take the first one, which is fragmented data ecosystems. What we are seeing is that disconnected internal and external data sources, they prevent the creation of a complete customer risk profile. As fraud becomes more data-driven, this fragmentation, it reduces detection accuracy and it also limits the contextual insights. Building a unified data fabric with real-time enrichment is going to be critical here. The next that we see in the intelligence layer is the inconsistent data quality and lineage. Now, poor data quality we are seeing along with duplication and lack of lineage tracking. It undermines the model performance and regulatory compliance. Inaccurate data, it leads to false positives and missed risks. Strong data governance frameworks with quality controls are essential here. The next that we see in the intelligence layer is the underutilization of external intelligence. Now, limited integration of third-party data such as watch lists, consortium intelligence, and threat feeds, it reduces the visibility into emerging risks. External intelligence is crucial over here for enhancing detection accuracy. Institutions, they should incorporate real-time external data sources here in order to overcome this issue. The next that we see is the absence of customer-centric risk view. Now, the risk is often assessed at a transaction level rather than across the entire customer lifecycle, which is resulting in fragmented insights. This limits the ability to understand evolving risk behavior. So what needs to be done is building a dynamic, continuous customer risk profiles is essential over here. The next that we see is the limited use of network and graph analytics. Now, many systems, they focus on individual transactions rather than analyzing relationships and networks, missing on the organized fraud rings and neural networks. This limits the ability to detect complex financial crime structures. Leveraging graph analytics we see can significantly enhance the detection. The last one in the intelligence layer is the lack of cross-channel risk correlation. Risk signals across payments, cards, digital banking, and communications are often not linked, which is limiting the visibility into coordinated fraud activities. As scams span multiple channels, this gap weakens detection capabilities. So here, the institutions we see must enable entity resolution and cross-channel behavioral analytics. Considering the last 2 points that we just discussed on the use of network and graph analytics and the cross-channel risk correlation, what we are seeing is not just a detection problem, it's an intelligence failure. Institutions, they are collecting signals, but they are not connecting them. The next we see is the orchestration layer, where we see how decisions are getting executed, workflows are getting managed, and systems are integrated. The first one that we see is the poor integration with case management systems. Now, what happens here is we've seen that the detection systems are often disconnected from investigation workflows, leading to inefficiencies in case handling and delayed responses. This increases operational costs and investigation backlogs. End-to-end workflow orchestration we see is going to be necessary for seamless operations. The next is the limited automation and investigator augmentation. There has been a heavy reliance on manual processes in investigations, which has slowed down the response times and has increased the operational burden. With rising case volumes and talented constraints, this approach is unsustainable. What we see is that the AI-driven automation and investigator augmentation tools can significantly improve the efficiency. The last one in the orchestration layer is the lack of scalability in cloud and hybrid architectures. Legacy infrastructure struggles to handle growing transaction volumes and data complexity, which is leading to performance bottlenecks. This impacts real-time detection capabilities and operational efficiency. Now, transitioning to scalable cloud native or hybrid architectures is critical over here. So these are the four layers that we see where the technology blind spots are there and where the end users are facing challenges. And we just spoke about how we can overcome on this. I pass on to my colleague for the next slide.
Thank you, Vishal. Just to let everybody know, okay, this is all good. We just spoke about the technology. Let us understand one thing. That's been a lot of biggest misconceptions running around in the financial crime today. Okay, that most of the institutions are under investing, like what Divya was telling, or they are over investing. But the reality, let us look at it. The reality that what's happening across now is that people are investing a lot across data. They are investing a lot on the technology part of it. They are investing a lot on the compliance part of it. But the real issue is not the investment. It is a lack of, like what Divya was telling, is a lack of alignment between the outcome of the investment. If you look at it from that angle, one part which Vishal was talking about was more on the technology aspect. We need to align all this technology aspect to the process, and we need to identify the gaps in the process. We need to identify what are the failure reasons for all of these. We have identified few of them. I would take you through most of them over here. One is the structural failure. When you look at the structural failure, what's really happening? We are working in silos. We don't have a fragmented ownership, which means to say that the fraud team, the AML team, the payments team, and compliance are all managed by different teams altogether. And often they have that different priorities. After working for almost 20 plus years, 295 years in the banking domain, I know for each of the teams, they have got their own, the financial market. Each of the teams have got their own KPIs. They have got their own set of risk segmentations. They have their own way of looking at it, which means to say the fraud team looks at it from a different angle. Then it moves to the AML team. The AML team looks at it from a KPI aspect. See, the most important thing over here that we need to really understand is that we do have all different teams in all the companies, in all the financial institutions. But if we are going to work in silos and if we are fragmented and we don't have an ownership of each of them, we are not going to resolve the issue. We are just going to create more and more issues for ourselves. And technology can do it. Technology can really help us integrate a lot. But how much is the question that we need to answer? We really need to understand what are the fragmented issues and how do we really bring them all together to make it into a big success. If you look at it, other when I have been working with banks, I would really say the KPIs of each of the team, they optimize or for their own success. These are just success metrics that they all look for, and they do not look at it from an enterprise level risk reduction. So from a structural failure point of view, I'm just taking these 2 points. I know there are a lot of points, but I'm looking only at few points over here to be considered. But at the same time, the fraud teams also optimize detections, understand, they also really want to really bring out what they have done. The AML team optimizes the compliance operations, and also they optimize throughput. But where is the accountability? Who is owning it from end to end is the question that we need to answer. Similarly, if you really go into the operational failures too, this is something I really want to elaborate a lot. Look, there are a lot, we really call it the alert factory model, where systems generate alerts, unless process alerts, and also cases gets closed. But there's no intelligence loop. There's a lot of broken workflows. There are a lot of manual handoffs. There are a lot of duplicated reviews. I'm sure in one case is where there was a fraud. There was a fraud in that case. People would be also looking at it from an AML point of view, and we also look at it from what have we done in the KYC point of view. We are all working in silos. We are not working as a team. We need to really look at it. How do we integrate the technology behind each of them and make sure if we look at one part, everything is really, there's an intelligence loop behind it, and there is happening at one place when we started, and we need to take the accountability of it, the ownership of it, and make sure that it is completely closed from end to end. Which means to say there's no feedback loops, is what I'm trying to tell. Outcomes are not fed back into the models itself if we take into a new model, because everybody is working in silos. And also there's no prioritization logic. See, there is one more thing which I really always I have been looking at it. There's a high risk and a low risk alerts which are treated similarly, but at the same time, what is a high risk for one team will not be the same high risk for the other team. Sometimes there's a lot of differences between both of them. They do not agree to that because basis that KPI requirements. From an operations point of view, also, if you look at it, we are more volume driven and not value driven. We need to really look into it. We need to look into what can we really do better. And if you look at it from a commercial payment point of view, this is even more critical because there's a lot of huge payment that is involved, and we really need to get thousands of signals and there's a lot of signals which comes from the commercial payments, and you get one chance to get it right, and if you lose it, we make a huge loss to the bank too. There's one more issue which I really want to speak over here, which is on the governance failure. See, there are too many which we could, if we start on this, what are the execution gaps? I'm sure if we'll start with the fishbone diagram, I'm sure we need a bigger fish than what is actually we really think about. And that is where we really, and if we start looking at from an Six Sigma point of view and start doing a demic for it, I'm sure we never would really come to a conclusion on how do we really define the problem and measure it. So let's start looking at it from a different angle. And when you look at it from a governance point of view and from a regulatory point of view, also there's a weak model validation where models are being deployed across. We have models in the KYC team, we have models in the AML team, we have models in the fraud team, but it's all again siloed models. When are we going to integrate all of them? And also look at the explainability. Each one wants their own way of looking at it. See, at the end of the day, regulators all ask for one kind of an explainability, and we need to work towards that. We don't have to give just because we have to prove ourselves in a financial institution how good our team is working. We do not have to give different explanations to people. We need to be common across, and this is becoming one of the major issues in putting up new models also. and getting into AI, also AI too. That is one of the reasons why the regulators do not also want to bring in direct explainability and interoperability into the system, and they want to still have it manual. But if we can prove that we are all going to, it is all combined together, and we can give one single explanation, that is nothing greater than that. And that is what the regulators also would really love to look at. We need to really look at new forms of risks and start working to it. Understand, execution failure of not a tech is not a technology problem. It is a system design problem. It's just the way how we prepare our process. It is very important on why the technology is failing. If we can integrate our process, nothing greater than that. Last, just to bring it closer to this thing, I just want to say, what we are seeing is not isolated inefficiencies. It is a system level design failures. And also, if you look at it, execution, like what I told you, it's architecture and operational model and an accountability problem over here that we're talking about. Moving ahead, please, Anish, can you move it to the next screen? Yeah, the next is even more intelligent, is even more interesting, which is nothing but our risk and the compliance issues that we are looking at. If you look at now, I'm sure everybody would be really thrilled to understand what am I going to speak about the geopolitics and the sanctions issues at present. I do not want to get into the geopolitics issue too much till we come to till all the countries, the OFAC, the big heads come to a conclusion on it. But if you look at it from the rapid geopolitical shifts, which is giving way to a lot of sanctions. Till last week, we had sanctions on Russian oil, but this week we don't have the sanctions on the Russian oil. We can really go ahead with it. See, there are a lot of changes. There are a lot of sanctions which has been put across and which has been removed, and there's no longer a stable or if I have to say, a consistent methodology to this, which people really fall through. With a lot of conflicts arising, with a lot of energy dynamics that is happening, and a lot of political negotiations, and also with the current situations that are happening across the world, be it on the be it for oil, be it for everything is getting into a bigger issue, where yesterday's permissible transactions are whether we are becoming that into a violations these days. So we need to really understand what the geopolitics and the sanctions are, and we need to even bring that, and we need to be over and above it. Looking at the similar way, if you look at even the emerging and the overlooked risks, if you look at it from a financial risk point, a crime point of view, every day it is evolving. The traditional banking risk into areas like abuse and then into real estate, those are all gone. Those were the days. Fraudsters are improving in and out. As with the regulators coming in with new ideas on how to really curtail them, they are coming up with a lot of new ideas on how do we really make sure that we break the rules. Criminals, they diversify. They are not into one place or in one country or in one side process. They are across. Institutions that focus only on traditional typologies, they would really miss out, because the financial world itself is growing very fast. And over and above that, the risk factors, the risk vectors that is associated to it, it's even more growing. So we need to, if you are not coming out of your traditional typologies and looking at what's happening, we are going to miss the train a lot, and will be laid back. And these are the reasons why the financial crime programs are falling short these days. If you look at it even from a regulatory divergence point of view, financial institutions can now operate across many regulatory regimes. You have got earlier, it was always, we used to look at it from an US point of view, or from an EU point of view, or from a monetary authority of Singapore point of view, or the 𝐀𝐭𝐜𝐿. But it's just not that. There's a lot of differences between them. There's a difference of I'm not difference of opinion, but in the way how each of them are looking at it from a regulatory point of view. Because in each region, one or the other important regulatory aspect has to be put across to curtail all the financial crimes. We also have resource and skill gap. It is one of the reasons for all these. If people are not updated, or if they are not growing with the faster regime, and what is happening, if they do not know what's happening on the regulatory market, or the regulators ask, then we do have people who are having a lot of skill gap, and because of that, people move out, because you need to really learn and you need to really move ahead every day, and every day in and day out is going to be, it's just not like any other monotonous process where people just come in, and financial crime and world is not just going to be where people come in, process cases and go out. Or even if you have got an AI or an ML model and you just tell, okay, the systems are going to process everything for me, I just need to do an QC check. Now that's not what we are going to look at in the future. That's not going to be really possible at all. We need, as a result, if you look at institutions face declining effectiveness because of a reason, people need to upgrade themselves. There's a lot of skill gap. We need to operate at just not like a manual process and just say that, okay, this is what regulators gave me 6 months back and I'm going to follow that with my blindfolded eyes. No, you cannot do that. If we are going to do that, then we are not moving ahead. We are just wearing our blinkers and we are telling, okay, this is what is right and that is wrong. And that is not the way how we really put it across. Similarly, there's a few more. Anish, if you can move to the next screen too. Data silos and privacy. This is one of the biggest issues that people are really looking at it now. Data required for financial effective detections, is fragmented. Like what we spoke earlier, is across geographies and across functions. AML team, the fraud team, we have spoken about it in the past slide too. And the sanctions team, everybody is working on silos. And we are not looking at everybody to really hold hand together. And I'm just repeating like a broken record that we need to really work through it together to make sure that there is an accountability and ownership for all of them, and everything had to move from end to end as a process. This is the intelligence-led detections that we are looking at. We are not just looking at just siloed processes over here. And data, every bank, I'm sure, financial institutions have led a lot of data on AML, on fraud, on sanctions, and everything. But what are we doing with it? Are we really integrating everything together and bringing one consolidated book or model where everybody can look at it? No use of that investing into a lot of technology unless you don't integrate them. We need to really start looking at it from that angle. Similarly, if you look at it on the next one, which is on the supply chain and ESG, also regulators are increasing and in linking financial crime with supply chain transparency. Institutions are expected to understand not just what the clients do, they also need to understand what the third party and downstream exposures are. An example to it is from the Australian Austrac too. We already know they have already put in rules wherein we have come out with real estate companies and companies where they have told that even real estate companies has to look at what their clients are doing and they need to start reporting across. This is just a starting. I'm sure all the regulators would start working towards that. And even if you look at it from a beneficial ownership point of view, criminal networks they exploit every opportunity that has been given to them. In traditional KYC approaches, often we fail to uncover these complex structures. We were talking at one point of time, I remember when I was doing KYC process of 25% ownership. Now then it came to 10%, anything more over and about 10%. But now with advanced resolutions and network analytics, institutions struggle to identify who actually controls or benefits from the transactions. We are not still able to find out. There's a lot of graphic analytics that we look at. There's a lot of hierarchy that we look at it. But how are we really connecting all of them? That is the question, and that question needs to be answered. And if we can answer those questions, that is where we would make all our programs really and successful. And technology also would help us across in identifying what would be the success factors going forward from here on. You can move ahead, Anish, please, to the next slide. Over to you, and Vishal.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. So let's take a look at the real-time payments and the scam economy. Now, before we dive into the details, it's important to recognize one fundamental shift, that financial crime is no longer operating at the speed of systems, but at the speed of payments. As transactions become instant, fraud is evolving just as quickly, exposing critical gaps in how current control frameworks are designed. Let's look at where these gaps are emerging and why traditional approaches are no longer sufficient. We take the first one, speed versus security, where there is a fundamental shift. Now, real-time payments, they have reduced fraud detection windows to milliseconds. Traditional controls, which have been built for delayed processing, they cannot keep pace, creating a growing gap between transaction speed and security effectiveness. The next that we see is the authorized push payment and social scams. Now, this has become the new entry point for fraudsters. Most fraud now originates through social engineering rather than system breaches. Authorized push payment scams, impersonation, and investment fraud. They exploit human behavior, requiring detection beyond transactions into behavioral and contextual signals. Then, on the synthetic identities, the risk surface is expanding. Synthetic identities, they are rising, blending real and fake data to bypass traditional KYC checks. Current systems often validate data points individually, but they fail to detect inconsistencies across the full identity ecosystem. We hear a lot about deepfakes and AI tools. So my next point is on that. AI, we see, is enabling fraud at scale through deepfakes, voice cloning, and impersonation. These techniques, they undermine the traditional verification methods and make fraud harder to distinguish from legitimate activity. Scams, which are evolving in real time, there we see the threats which are coming across the channel. Fraud now, it operates across multiple channels simultaneously, that is through mobile, web, and social platforms. Siloed detection systems, they struggle to identify these coordinated real-time attack patterns. So what is the core insight in speed versus control paradox? We see as payments move in milliseconds, traditional post-event detection models, they have become ineffective. Fraud must be identified before or during transactions and not after settlement, highlighting a structural gap in current frameworks. Now, with all this, what it means for financial institutions. Institutions must shift to real-time event-driven models. Now, this includes AI-led risk scoring, continuous monitoring, and network-level intelligence instead of static, rule-based, and periodic approaches. Finally, what we see is that the financial crime programs are not lacking controls. They are using controls built for a slower world. The future requires real-time, intelligence-led, and adaptive risk management aligned with modern payment speeds. So this is all about we look at on the real-time payments and scam economy. I pass it on to my team for the next slide, please.
Okay, good. Now that Vishal has talked about real-time scams and everything, I just want to take you guys through a little bit of case study, especially on the push payment frauds and on siloed systems, which would really set the context over here. See, these are these are just examples that we have looked at. If you look at how the fraudsters are really exploiting the social media telecoms, and if you look at it, even 78% of the total authorized push payments, which is the app scams, um, are most of it are online. Victims, what happens? It is a case of where victims and of authorized payments versus instant rails and transactions appear, which are legitimate in nature. They appear to be now becoming, everybody is scared of it. They do not know whether it's a legitimate transaction or is it a scam that is really happening towards them. There is a lot of study, especially from an app fraud, which is on the transaction, which is also on the behavior and the cross-channel intelligence failure that's happening. The losses actually exceed to the extent of as per 2022 studies, it is actually 485 million pounds, which is being given by the EU authorities. And these are one of the reasons for it is just because we have siloed systems. We do not have cross-channel queues. We do not have proper rule-based models. And these are all reasons for all these happening. If you look at it, even we need more of an integrated FRAML network, which is nothing your fraud and AML network together, which needs to really work together to identify the behavioral analytics of the individuals. You can also look at one more example, which is for a 3 billion, which is again on an AML failure. And I don't want to get into the numbers specifically over here, but if you look at it, the underinvestment allowed multiple money laundering networks to move illicit funds from the US. And these are the reasons. And there are a lot of lessons that we learn from all this. AML programs must be adequately resourced now. And it needs a lot of testing, and we need to really start scaling up on it. And we need to make sure that the investments that we are making are making sense by making sure that the AML program is properly tested, it is scaled up, and we have adequate models which are required for the regulators also to look at it and give up a perfect output which would really curtail all our financial crimes. Move ahead, Nish. Divya, would you like to take the 2026 risk priorities, or can I go ahead with it?
Yeah, Anand, you can go ahead with it.
Thank you. Okay. On the risk priorities, I'm not going to take a lot of time. I know we are short of time, so I'm just going to take it quick. It's going to be on, the priorities are going to really be on real-time payment risk, wherein detection windows have reduced to seconds. We all know that we do not have too much time for instant payment in the instant payment ecosystem where to take decisions. So it's just minuscule time, seconds, that we need to identify the risk associated to the payment and identify it's a fraud payment or it is going to be what's happening towards it, and we need to really start working towards it. And similarly, if you look at the scam and social engineering that is happening, frauds is increasingly driven through by customer manipulation, like what our good friend Vishal was talking about, rather than through deep fake synthetic IDs and all those. We need to be quick enough in identifying the anomalies, and behavioral signals and would start playing the critical role in preventing such kind of payment risk. If you look at it from a converged financial crime too, you can look at fraud, AML sanctions, and cyber risk, or all needs to get interconnected or would be interconnected in the 2026. As we speak, I know most of the companies have started working towards it. Banks have started working towards it so that they have a lot of financial crime which can be controlled by this methodology. Also, if you look at it from a sanctions and volatility point of view, the rapid geopolitics changes are driving continuous updates in the sanctions regime. Like what I spoke to you earlier, that is going to take off more, and you will find a lot of changes happening in the sanctions world, which would really come to you overnight, and we need to really start working towards it then and there. And also remember, guys, there's a lot of hidden network risks. I know there's a lot of networking and also consortiums that people are working across. These all would be embedded in the complex ownership structure, and people would start working on and would really start facilitating these networks, identifying the relationship between and also the controls associated. There'll be a lot of consortiums happening, because we know that this is what is going to run or keep us away from fraudsters. And also looking at the next 2 point, which is on the digital asset and the cross-border risk. Emerging payments rails like crypto and A2A introduce faster and less transparent fund flows. But when we speak about it, they also come with a lot of risk, especially with respect to cryptos and the A2A. This creates a new challenge, in monitoring how is it really going through. We really need to understand the end-to-end life cycle of it, which is really going to be difficult in the crypto. But we need to really cultivate a system or a technology which should come in 2026, I'm sure, which vendors are working across, which would really identify all the end-to-end systems and encrypt it across. And last, if you look at it from a model governance risk, there's a reliance on AI, and also on the explainability and the validation of it. All these big signals would really go out, and we will start looking more on AI ML models, and we would make sure that these are going to be the next priorities, which would give us the risk aspect even before they come to us. We are looking at more of a predictive risk analysis rather than proactive approaches. And when it comes to governance and model accountability, there are I have put across 5 major points over here, which is going to really rule it over in this full year in 2026. Outcome-based regulations. Regulators are no longer focused on whether the controls exist or not. And those days are gone when they used to put in regulators come with controls, and they say, have you implemented all the controls, and what are the measurable ways that you look at it. Institutions would have to demonstrate how they have really put the controls, what is the output of it, and what is the reduced fraud losses out of it. And they need to really start quantify it with the help of what the controls that is put in place. And that is going to also go through your AI ML model, and that is what they are starting to look at. And model governance and explainability, if you look at it, as AI becomes, AI is going to play a very big role in this financial crime detections. And with that, by telling that, there's going to be a lot on the models that we are putting across. Firms cannot just justify decisions to the regulators to build confidence in automated controls alone. They need to justify it. They need to really put an explainability to it. They need to really tell what is the reason for each of the cases really moving out, and what is the reason for the cases being in, and how is it being reported to. And risk-based designs, we have the static rules and fixed thresholds are no longer the sufficient. It's not going to really work out, because we said in the earlier stages that the traditional methodologies are not going to work out. Institutions need to adapt. They need to adapt to the new models. They need to be dynamic enough. We need to look at emerging fraud patterns and behaviors and start getting into all those and look at the new typologies that's coming across. We also need to look at what is happening on the cross-institution collaborations, just like the one that I spoke on network intelligence and on the consortiums and on what's happening on the collaborative intelligence that all the other banks have got or the institutions have got, and how can we really rely on them and use the maximum utilize them. And when it comes to beneficial ownership and transparency, the above point, which is going to be on the especially on network intelligence and also on the consortiums and also on a way how other banks are working across, people start learning from other banks and big banks like JP Morgan and the cities and the Barclays. People are going to start learning from them, and that is what is going to make the biggest changes. That's from my side. I now give it to Divya for the last.
So, with all the discussion that we had on the risk priorities and specifically on compliance and governance, let's look at where the market is heading. And the most important message that I feel of today's session is going to be that the future of financial crime management will not be any more on alert reduction, but it will be more towards autonomous risk decisioning. And this is where we see the majority of financial crime frameworks moving towards. So, what we see is that we see six major shifts, which is defining the next phase of what we call the autonomous risk decisioning. The first is what we already spoke about, which is the real-time uh, AML and fraud convergence. So that is something which is happening, and we see in future growing even more. Sub-second decisioning, which both Vishal and Anand has talked about, is going to be even more important going, forward. We'll see more of unified platforms. So, single data fabric, single decision engine. So that is going to be become the norm in the coming years. AI and graph analytics will be very important. So, be it agentic AI or graph models for either predicting risk or identifying hidden networks, everything is kind of become very important for decisioning purpose. In the future, we'll also see more of digital identity and data sharing. So here, what will define the terms is federated identity frameworks and the intelligence sharing across banks. We'll see more of, and we do expect more of collaboration between public-private sectors. So, in terms of sharing risk, visibility, or joint intelligence ecosystems, that is going to be become more popular. Lastly, adaptive governance will, be crucial because we are talking about continuous model lifecycle management. So it will be, throughout implementation, detecting, tuning, and everything. There has to be the whole model management that has to be continuous, and also what will be required is real time validation and oversight. So real time is the key here. So these are going to be more of the future trends, and as said, that the system is moving from a reactive to predictive to more of an autonomous financial crime platform. So with this, the next slide, which is our closing slide, and which is more like a set of recommendations that QKS group has put, and these are like kind of cumulatively we have aggregated all the best practices that leading institutions are doing, and we have kind of list out for you quick recommendations which will be easy for you and which you can keep in your roadmap going forward. So, first and foremost, what you need to do is unify risk and compliance teams. Yeah, quickly going through that. So, unifying risk and compliance teams, invest in real time platforms, right? That is very important. Adopting AI and graph models for more explainability. AI should not be just latched on, it should be embedded into your decision layer. You should look at more centralized data and intelligence. So, no more silos, no more fragmented data, and look for a single source of truth, a single data fabric. Look at enhanced uh, governance and transparency. So, what we are looking at is auditability of decisions, transparent model behavior. So, these things are going to be the norm. Last but not the least, do invest in your workforce, upskill them, augment them with the right tools and technologies. So that is going to be enough. And definitely, if I have to leave you today with one thought, what we believe as the next phase of financial crime transformation evolution will not be the ones who have the most data or who has the most models, but it will be the institutions who have the vision to turn intelligence into decision. And this decision will need to be made in real time, at scale, and with confidence. So, this is where the market is heading, and this is what leaders have already started investing in. So, that's all from our side for today's webinar. Over to you, Anish.
So much, guys, and thank you so much, Divya, for that. In fact, we have received a couple of questions. Either we can revert to them via mail soon after the session, or I can go ahead and ask those in this last couple of sessions. To all those who are stretching their last couple of minutes, thank you so much for that. And team, you let me know if you want me to ask these questions at this moment, or you want us to revert back to them via mail on this.
Maybe we can take one question in the week of time.
So there was a discussion regarding a challenge. So we have received a question which is talking about what is the biggest challenge today that all companies are facing with respect to the crime and compliance aspect. Maybe Anand, you can take this up.
I'll do that. Thank you. The biggest challenge that most of the companies are facing at present would be towards data fragmentation, which we have spoken in detail over here. There's a lot that people need to really work through. There's also something which Divya has also insisted in her last thoughts, also in the leadership thoughts, which is on real-time directions, because we need real-time activities now, direction to happen now. We cannot be working in taking the past data. We need to be now predictive. So we need to really know what's happening in the market, and we need to quickly act on it. There is a lot of regulatory, like what we just spoke on the geopolitical sanctions, and also on the moral governance, on the risk part, explainability. There's a lot which is going to come from a regulatory point of view. So we need to work towards that too. So these three would really take a lot importance from an process and from a technology. But the most important would be on your model governance. What is it that we are going to do from a model governance point of view? And we need to really start looking at our model. We need to really bring in a unified model across. We need to start looking at what the regulatory requirements are, and make sure our a FRAML network is so strong enough that we do not work in silos, and we need to start working towards one unified model. And that will be the challenge that people would really need to face, are facing, and we need to start working towards that.
Thank you so much, Anand, for sharing light on that. In fact, to all those people who raised your questions, we'll surely get back to all of you via mail. And if you have any further queries, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So as we conclude today's session, I would like to sincerely thank all of you for joining us and for being a part of today's discussion. Today's conversation highlighted that while financial institutions have made strong progress in adopting advanced technologies, true effectiveness comes from execution, governance, and integration, like the team clearly mentioned today. This is across fraud, AML, and compliance functions. As we move to 2026, building resilient, accountable, and outcome-driven financial crime programs will be more critical. A special thank you to all our speakers today, Divya, Anand, and Vishal, for sharing your valuable insights and practical perspectives on how organizations can strengthen execution and improve risk outcomes. And to all our attendees, thank you for your time and to your questions that we'll be getting back to you. At the same time, do stay updated to all our research, our latest insights, and all our upcoming webinars. Do follow us on LinkedIn. At the same time, do visit our website to check out the upcoming webinars and the panel discussions that we have from this team, as well as from all the other respective industries that we cover. We look forward to having you all join us in the future sessions. And once again, thank you all and have a very great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.